Hi, I'm Kent. Let's try out some new glazes. On my last run to the Pottery store, I decided to go ahead and get a few new glazes, at least new to me. So I decided to get these three. The color swatches look interesting. So far, I'm mostly picking glazes randomly. I haven't figured out exactly what I like and don't like. Most of you probably are not familiar with this brand. It actually turns out that these are made by my local pottery store as well. So it might be a little hard for you guys to get your hands on these, but at least I can show you what they look like. This one here is Tahitian Sunset. It's an art glaze. Malachite green, it's a matte art glaze. And finally, indigo blue matte art glaze as well. So we got two mattes and one gloss glaze. These are formulated for brushing on application, which isn't my preferred way to put glaze on. What I like to do is dip them. So first thing is I'm going to shake these really well, and then I'm going to put them into a different container. There's a little bit of glaze that winds up being left in here. Usually what I wind up doing is just taking a tiny bit of water and shaking it around to loosen it up and pour it in. So I just put in some water and I'll give it a good shake. Make sure the lid's cranked down. That lets me get almost all of the glaze out of the container. While I'm at it, I'll go ahead and put a label on this. So I just use a little bit of packing tape, put it down on the top, put one on the side, and get a Sharpie. I can use the packing tape so I can take it off and not have to worry about marking up the container itself, so I can swap them out later. So this one is Tahitian Art 4552. Label the top. I like labeling the top since it's easier to see. Looking at the side's a little bit difficult. However, sometimes the top can get separated from the container itself. So by labeling the side, I can make sure I always have the right glaze. Next up is the malachite. I should also mention these glazes are all formulated to go to cone 5-6, which is where I fire my clay. I have stoneware. Just label this one as well. This is the only glaze I got that's not food safe. Actually, it's the only glaze I've had so far at all that's not food safe. There we go, all of the glaze out of the original containers and into something a little bit more useful. And this here is why it's important to label the glazes. These are just two different shades of gray right now, and one's gonna fire blue and one's gonna fire green. So good to keep them straight. Next up, I'm gonna give these a whirl with my immersion blender to make sure they're all nicely mixed up. And since I added a little bit of extra water to get the remaining glaze out, I'll make sure it's all evenly distributed. These containers are a bit short, so sometimes the glaze splatters out. So I just take a paper towel and put it over the top. This one's pretty thick. I might end up adding a little bit more water, but we're gonna try using it as it is. All right, those are all mixed up and have had a second to settle a little bit. Get all the bubbles out. So hiding here off to the side a little bit, I have half dozen pots. These have all been glazed with clear on the inside. And you'll notice I have 6 pots and only 3 glazes. So these are art glazes, and so from what I understand, they're actually sensitive to the thickness of the application. I'm going to dip 2 into each color. The first one, I will do a double layering of the glaze on the rim, so it's extra thick. And for the second one, I'll actually put a layer of the clear glaze on top, and so it'll be a little bit more thin. So let's start here with the Tahitian glaze. Give it a quick spin. One thing I've noticed about these commercial glazes is that they dry super slow. I'm guessing this is because they've been formulated for brushing, and so they have some additives that make it easier to brush on, but for dipping, they just take a while to dry out. The glazes I've been mixing up from powders dry super, super fast. So I just need to let this one sit and drip for a little extra long. Otherwise, I'll get runs down the side. Let's do the green next. Same drill. And finally the blue. All right, all the pots have been dipped. So I've got a nice thick coat on all of these. As I mentioned, this glaze takes a good while to dry. So I'm going to go ahead and let it do that, and then we can put on the coat for the rim. These have been drying for a couple hours now. They are still a little bit damp, but not too bad. And the glaze went on thick in a couple of places. I'm not sure if you can see that on camera, but there's a few little drippies. So I've got all my glazes here hanging off to the side. I went ahead and gave them another mix. So I'm going to dip the tops of these again, just a little bit, so that I'll have an extra thick layer of glaze on one of them. And then I have a clear base glaze hanging here off to the other side. I'll dip the other pots in. Just going to dip the rim. Green, I've got labels hanging here off to the side so I knew which row is which, since you just saw this, but I will forget. And finally the blue, just this last one here. All right, and do the same thing again with my base glaze. Just have a little bit of this glaze left. It is definitely way thinner than the commercial glaze. This is when I mixed up myself. I realized that also, so this is the clear glaze on top of the commercial glaze. On the inside, I have the opposite. I actually have the commercial glaze on top of the clear glaze. So we can check out the inside as well, see what that looks like. All right, there they are. I'm gonna let these dry out the rest of the way. I'm gonna augment my labels here so I can keep track of which one's which. Once they're thoroughly dry, I will put them into my next glaze firing and we can see what they look like. I had a good glaze firing, but I had some problem with these glazes. Some of them stuck to the shelf. So I was able to get the pots off. While the pots, I think, are probably not salvageable, I think the shelf's okay for the future. I just had to chip off the excess glaze and I put some more kiln wash on it. But you're not here for that. Let's look at the pots. As I mentioned when I was putting these on, this glaze seemed extra thick, and indeed it was too thick. It ran down. So this Tahitian glaze had problems. You can see it's all bubbly on the bottom here, which is no good. This one didn't run off the bottom, but this one did. I had to break it off and actually chip the pot when I did so. Besides that, it's a pretty cool glaze, so I need to put it on less thick, but it gives me a really interesting color. The other comparisons were the double dipping of the glaze. So this one here is where I double dipped the rim, and this is the one that ran down more, so it was just loaded up with too much glaze. I don't really see much of a color variation. Maybe there's a little bit going on. And this one is where I put the clear on top. Again, it's hard to tell what was from the clear glaze. Maybe this line here was from that. Interesting glaze. Definitely need to be careful with application. Next up was the green. This is a really cool pot. I really like this surface finish. So in particular, this is the one that I double dipped, so it's straight up green. Got this almost alligator matte surface. It's a little bit metallic. This is one that also ran down and broke my pot, so I need to be careful of putting too much on. It pooled here on the bottom to turn an even darker, deeper green. And the inside's really cool. So this is where the double dip ran down over the clear. So very, very cool effect. Here, dipping it with the clear on top kind of muted a lot of the matte finish and alligator effect. I don't think I like this one as much. It's a really cool pot, but I definitely like this one better. And then the blues wound up being very similar. These were successful. They did not run off the bottom of the pot. I don't know if I had slightly less glaze or it's just a little bit less runny in its formulation. So this really cool matte finish on the top. And this one did somewhat similar as the green, where I have the clear on top. It definitely ran out, changed the finish. I like the straight up glaze better. And the inside of these are also really, really cool. I think these would be fun on a form where you could see the inside and see that kind of drippy effect. I could also do this on the outside of the pots. I could put a coat of clear on the bottom and then put the glaze down, and I could get that effect that way. It's one of the nice things about being able to do the test this way. I could see the combination of the new glaze over clear as well as the clear glaze over the base. So order of application definitely matters. So besides the slight disaster of the pot sticking to the shelf, these are really cool. In particular, these two are my favorite. I really like this effect. I'm definitely going to be using these on a bunch more pots. I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.